everyone. It's 5 p.m. in the UK. Thank you very much for being with us. Here is TiiQu Talks. My name is Laura Degiovanni. I'm hosting this session talking about digital transformation and how cybersecurity can be the accelerator or eventually the decelerator of digital transformation. Together with me, Albert Whale, Jenai Marinkovic, and Alex Lee. I will very shortly introduce who is TiiQu Talk and then leave the podium to Alex, who will be moderating the panel discussion and introducing the topic. And then, of course, the floor will go to our distinguished guests. So very quickly said, for those who don't know TiiQu Talks, these are our weekly event about sustainability and emerging technologies. The focus of TiiQu Talk, which is an initiative of TiiQu, is to make knowledge sharing around these key topics accessible to everyone and possibly foster the conversation among skills that matter. And tribes are groups of people sharing the same interest in specific topics around, again, emerging technologies and sustainability topics. We invite you all, first of all, to follow TiiQu Talks. Second, to sign up to the website, and possibly if you do feel that you have the expertise and the knowledge that you want to share, come along and let us know what you would like to talk about, or eventually give a look to my TiiQu and think if you see yourself contributing your knowledge to a decentralized, distributed encyclopedia of question and answers around the topics you are an expert in, because that's our latest initiative. So now, without any further delay, I leave the floor to Alex, who will be introducing the topic and share with us his thoughts. I stop sharing and leave the floor to Alex.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Because we have some confusion about the time because of the daylight saving time started in the United States, and then all of the speakers joined 1 hour before the meeting.
Alex, we did not have a mistake about the time or misunderstanding for daylight savings. It was on our calendar.
It was me eventually the mistake.
Okay, so I will share my screen first. Then I will okay, let me check that. Okay, so we are going to have our individual talk first. And then we are going to have a panel discussion to all the speakers gathered together. So basically, I'm going to introduce some topics, and especially for some of the topic, actually the rare for the cybersecurity professionals, but I'm expertise in ESG sustainability and cybersecurity. So I'm going to introduce what is the topic is related to cybersecurity, and ESG sustainability is a hot topic now. And then after my talk, and then we have 2 distinguished speakers in highly expertise in cybersecurity. So the first one will be Jenai Marinkovic, and then also the second one is Albert Well, and then they will talk in order to and the present and their individual view about our topics, and then we are going to have a panel discussion after that. And then in generally, we operating the panel discussion based on the participant question, but I'm not sure whether, because we don't have any like a selected question from the participants. Maybe if there may be some question from the participant, and then we will be the answer and the discuss about that questions. And without that participant questions, and then we're going to discuss generally about our potential topic, like for example, what is the current state of the security technology, or for the digital asset or the critical infrastructure, how they can protect it, and then recent topic. And I think that among the cybersecurity, there was like pro and con about the zero trust. One funny thing was that I attended a big cybersecurity event. It is on like a on-site event held in Boston last week, and then there was about the 500 gathered together, and then there was a big exhibition show. And then I was looking for someone might be interesting as a speaker for this event, especially the zero trust. And then I found several, and then I was talk about some other cybersecurity professionals about how do you think about the zero trust strategy, and somebody said it sucks. I'm not sure why, but because zero trust might be very, very popular, but also maybe some worry about it, and then too much, maybe some attention contrast to their values. So I'm not actually the expertise in here, so maybe our distinguished experts like Albert or the Jenai maybe have answer. And then also, actually, the Albert is also very expertise in cybersecurity meshes, so he maybe talk about that. And then AI for cybersecurity is popular, and I also saw that a bunch of the vendors utilizing AI for the cybersecurity, for example, like protecting from the ransomware attack. And I also have expertise in here, so if there's something that have a question, then I can give something about this topic. And then finally, I'm going to cover the cybersecurity as an ESG security risk management. Okay, then I will start my topic first. Okay, in the full mode. Okay, so I will cover some topic about what is ESG sociability, and then why the cybersecurity is very important and how you do. So I'm not cover detail about the imperative because it's not the ESG sociability evidence, but I'm going to just a snapshot why it is important, because this is a global level effort in the United Nations have effort to make a sustainable development goals in around the world. And then we also worry about the climate change risk. And then we worry about like too much waste, and then plastic in the ocean to like have some problem. And then also you know that there are a lot of the investment is going on. And mostly that the Harvard Business Review said like a sustainable businesses went mainstream. So it's a part of the everyday business practice in all companies. So now this is the most like important topic to consider in the executive meeting and the board meetings. So that's why I'm going to talk about it. And then what is the matter with the cybersecurity in ESG? And basically that is cybersecurity is one topic of the ESG is topic of the S in S. You need to care about your society and your customers, and then protecting the valuable customer data is very important. So cybersecurity is one way to actually measure how you protect your customers' data. And then also in the G, actually how you actually govern your cybersecurity issues to protect your company from the hackers or something like that. Is one of the governance topic for every executive to concern about. So that's why that it is a big part of the ESG management as a part of the risk management. So so usually in the ESG and sustainability community, that they usually reporting their performance, how they manage their ESG management, and then we call like ESG reporting and also sustainability reporting, and then every big company actually the reporting how they manage their like ESG, and then sustainability also is the same thing as ESG, and then the cybersecurity, as mentioned, as a part of the S or the G, is an important topic to be to be reporting, like the putting in like accounting like a disclosure. So there are some standard how you're reporting your cybersecurity measure. Like for example, the SASP is one of the standard about the they define like a customer privacy and data security. You need to like manage these issues, and then you need to like reporting how you well manage or how your performance of this topic. Also, GRI is another topic that they need to be like, you need to be compliant about the how you like do risk management with respect to cybersecurity. And then here is actually I use AI tool that I developed to how well perform in every aspect of the ESG topics. And then I carefully look at the cybersecurity that I found that some companies are very well managed in cybersecurity and some are not. So it's like compared with other, actually cybersecurity is less performance. That means that in general cybersecurity is a top priority for every company, but with respect to ESG performance is lower than other topics. So that's why we need to be concerned about the cybersecurity as a part of ESG. And I did every sector. Some sectors good, and some sectors are not depending on their business. And then this is actually I propose that because the cybersecurity has no any good standard to reporting. That means that there is no any guideline to how to measure your cybersecurity risk management with respect to your sustainability or ESG management. So here is some, I propose that there may be some reporting standard, and then you can look at it in the globally that in the personal information how they actually protect, and then here is a widespread of the regulation about the cybersecurity measures. And then also in the like how actually it can develop this cybersecurity reporting standard. Like for example, I just look at the idea that maybe the CISA cyber resilience review process, like this cybersecurity framework type, can be a good candidate. You can do that. And then here is the one. This is the general agenda. How you do is a cybersecurity risk management. So this is the one is a non-threat risk and the non-mitigation solution is a happy side, or some of the unknown threat risk, but the non-mitigation solution is a little bit better. But here, two sides is worst case. One is unknown threat,
and then it was found,
and on non-mitigation solutions. And then here is the toughest one and very uncertain about the unknown threat risk and the unknown mitigation solution part. So we need to think about these four regimes that whenever you think about cybersecurity management, and then which part actually that you're concerned about. And personally, actually, I'm developing my own cybersecurity solutions. So actually, I'm one of my vision is incubating innovative technology, and then cybersecurity is one of my topics. So I develop collaborate other. For example, I usually collaborate the university and then try to commercialize their like researches to the commercial level. And then this is technology, actually the one topic that I'm thinking about this one, right? Because whether there is some way fundamentally do well in this kind of the risk management. So I was just thinking about at the fundamental level, whether it's unknown or whatever, that is there any universal ways to protect? So I just have some way to is actually what happened with like your cybersecurity like risk. Fundamentally, there are many ways. For example, at the network level, or you can protect your email or whatever in many different layers that you can do your cybersecurity protect. But I'm thinking about the fundamental level that actually what you need to protect, actually the software. So we need to protect the software at the fundamental level, whether it's a network layer or it is a core layer, whatever. So So we developed the technology of GEOS is fundamentally that put into our system, our software to the each individual software to make them as a protect themselves. So this is one actually our idea that just rather than protecting, this is some kind of like for example COVID-19 vaccine, right? So protecting something maybe in the like you make a wall. Like in the outside of your cities, outside of your system that make protecting, like protecting in the world. Or you can think about looking at the like a network traffic, whatever, and then communication, and then you can protect the flow of the information. And then we are thinking about the individual software can protect themselves by putting some our software inside their software. So that's one my idea that I'm looking at. Okay, so I start my share. So I think that we are now time to hear from our distinguished speakers. So I will start from Jenai.
Howdy, how's everybody doing? All right, give me one moment and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, howdy, my name is Janae Marinkovic and I am the executive director for a nonprofit called Gracie, or the GRC, for Intelligent Ecosystems Foundation. And it was a 501c3 organization that we just started within this past year that really focuses on training women, people of color, and people from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities into cybersecurity and GRC roles, and then into middle management, and then ultimately to chief security officers. We train them as well. And today I want to talk about artificial intelligence and auditing. So instead of going the cybersecurity route, I decided to go a little bit different and talk about GRC. And the reason is that GRC around specifically algorithms is still very much in its infancy. And if we're talking about digital transformation and what is an accelerator and a decelerator, this is a place where we have a severe problem. And I figured I would take the opportunity to highlight it a little bit. So we are, as we all know, in the midst of, or the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. And what's interesting about that is that this time is this interconnection between these hyper-instrumented physical, biological, and digital worlds. And when you are at the dawn of any industrial revolution, you end up with what are called these big bang disruptions, right? These disruptions where we're unable to really predict the depth and the breadth of which these disruptions are going to occur. And because of where we are today, we start seeing them creating and destroying product lines, markets, ecosystems, literally overnight. We've also entered the third wave of AI. And in this era, we're beginning to see where we are imbuing human capabilities onto virtual assistants, AI, that ultimately deliver these personalized experiences that span worlds. We are entering what is called the age of intelligent ecosystems. So what is an intelligent ecosystem? If we think about it, what is required to be intelligent, right? What is required to be a thinking being, a thinking system? Well, there's two, right? You need the ability to think, but you also need the ability to sense. And if we look at it through the lens of a biological system, such as our brain is a fundamental component of the central nervous system, and it is informed through a complex system of sensory organisms or organs. I mean, it's the same thing when we look at intelligent ecosystems in the digital world, right? They are thinking systems that are informed through layers of sensors that give them the ability to think. Oops, sorry about this. And while business and strategy in general tend to inform where technology goes, we are actually in this very unique time where the acceleration of technology is actually driving transformational business models. And nowhere is this greater than the proliferation of artificially intelligent systems. And so in order for us to be prepared as cybersecurity and GRC professionals, we need to understand how do you design the controls necessary to protect and defend and in a lot of cases operate within these intelligent ecosystems. So let's talk about AI and GRC. So auditing AI, building control structures for AI is difficult. First off, there aren't any really well-defined frameworks. ICO does a pretty good job of helping out, but we're still building those things out. But ultimately, there's this lack of security and compliance considerations from the time we start gathering requirements to build out algorithms to the time we deprecate them. And here's a big part, and this is what I want to focus on in today's talk. There's this lack of explainability from the beginning of the design phase all the way through deployment and operationalization. And that's a problem. And so explainability is a key component to ensuring that an AI system is ultimately built properly and explainable at every single phase. And so sources of reference here for this talk came from ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office based out of the UK, and the Alan Turing Institute, who both work together to put together these really interesting frameworks around how you consider privacy and how you consider the auditing frameworks around AI. So in January of 2017, a group of AI researchers, came together and they came up with 23 essential rules when you're building out an AI system called Elsemar's AI principles. And the sixth one, which is what we're going to focus on, is that AI systems should be safe and secure throughout their entire operational lifetime, and verifiably so where appropriate and feasible. So what does all of this have to do with the acceleration or deceleration of digital transformation? It's because we tend to, when we're building out these systems, speed is always of the essence. And we're also doing it oftentimes as part of these innovation phases. And what ends up happening is it goes from innovation to production overnight. And so we all know that when you're trying out, when you're testing, when you're innovating, that there's a lot of shortcuts that you end up taking. And because we don't follow all of the appropriate processes from beginning to end, we end up deploying these systems that aren't well explained, that aren't well documented, that aren't well thought out. We tried one model, not multiple. And what ends up happening is that it feels like we're going faster, but we're not. Right? Because if our systems are unexplainable, if our systems are being attacked and breached, all of the time and effort that it takes to get those systems course corrected is lost time. And so on one hand, we believe that, hey, AI allows us to accelerate, but from a cybersecurity perspective and a GRC perspective, if we're not really considering these things at every single phase, we're actually decelerating the process. Do things the right way. So what are some of the benefits of explainability? Obviously a couple, right? Quality, trust, legal compliance, fairness, and transparency. By putting in place the appropriate rules around explainability, it helps ensure not only that the auditor or the GRC analyst is capable of going in and assessing, but it also makes sure that we're ultimately compliant with the law. And one of the cool things about an explainable system is that systems that are explainable at every single phase tend to be actually well designed. There are four major principles in making AI explainable. One is that it must be transparent. The algorithm itself must be transparent. We must be able to explain it. Two, it has to be accountable. We need to make sure that the people who are overseeing the design and the development and the deployment of the algorithm have built in the appropriate requirements to make sure that things are safe and secure. We need to consider the context. When we're planning on using AI to make decisions, we've got to consider the context in which this algorithm is going to be operating. And then finally is we've got to reflect on the impacts. And this is a place where we oftentimes fall down, right? And this is where we start looking at where bias oftentimes can start creeping in, right? If we don't have a diverse team from beginning to end that is responsible for designing these algorithms, then it is very difficult for us to consider all of the downstream impacts, the physical, the emotional, the sociological impacts that it has on people. And so this is, but bias creeps into models in a variety of different ways. But if we don't have diverse teams building these algorithms, it is almost impossible for us to fully comprehend the impact that the algorithms are going to have. So while we have 4 main principles, there are 6 different types of explainability. One is rational explanation. What led us to this decision? And whenever we're doing things in terms of explainability, it needs to be written in a and described in a way that the layman or the layperson can understand. Otherwise, it's not an explainable model. If you're trying to explain something to another AI designer, that's one thing, but especially when we start looking at things like GDPR, you need to make sure that it is explainable to the person who is requesting the information about how that algorithm made a decision about my personal information. So it's got to be rational. Responsibility, who is involved in the development of this system. You need a data explanation. What data has been used and how? Oftentimes, especially when we're at that innovation phase, right? We pull data from a lot of different places and we don't necessarily consider all of the bias that may be latent in the way that the data was collected in the first place. So how is the data collected? How is it going to be used? Fairness, what steps did we take to make sure that the algorithm itself is fair, that the decisions that it's making are unbiased, and that everybody who is affected by this algorithm are treated equitably. Safety and performance, what steps did we take to make sure that the system is safe? If we think about this, especially if we're talking about algorithms that are being used in life safety systems, autonomous vehicles, any system where a life is at risk, we need to make sure that safety and performance are considered. And that's physical safety. There's a whole aspect, especially if we start looking in the metaverse, of how our safety is in the metaverse, which is this combination of biological and digital safety. And since the metaverse is imbued with algorithms, we need to make sure that that's key. And then the impact explanation. We need to be able to explain the impact in, again, human language that that describes what is the impact ultimately of these algorithms. Now, I want to make sure, because I want to be respectful of time, so I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly. There is a mapping for all 6 of those explanation types to the principle. And so when we look at the rational explanation and the data explanation, those all tie to how we are being transparent. When we start looking at the responsibility explanation, that's all about accountability. And when we consider the impact explanation, it is all about context. And then finally, fairness and then safety and performance is also about impact. So there are 8 main steps that we came together that allow us to ultimately audit an algorithm. One is define what are all the 6 explainability types based on the algorithm that you're building. 2 is to document all data collection and pre-processing activities, period. And notice all of this documentation that we're talking about, on all this documentation that doesn't occur when we start building out these systems. This is where I'm talking about acceleration and deceleration, because this sounds like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? This is an insane amount of work. But the problem is that if you don't do this, then does your algorithm actually do what you think it's going to do? Does it have the impacts that you think it's going to have? Quality is key, right? And so we need to make sure that we're ultimately documenting at each stage of the process in order to make sure that we are building a quality algorithm. We need to assess all process and technology in place to make sure that it's built to relevant information for explainability. 4 is we need to document a rationale for building this system. Did we actually have to use an algorithm in order to do that? That's one of the things that GDPR asks when we're talking about automated data processing, right? Is that did you actually have to use AI in order to build a system? Was there another way of doing it? How did the team prepare the implementers to deploy the system? And when we think about the implementers, again, we have to think of everybody, not just the engineering teams, but the IT teams that are responsible for the systems, the infrastructure, the database, all of the systems, that tie to, that specific algorithm, they all need to be pulled in. The security teams need to be pulled in. How many forensics organizations have actually been trained, right, to be able to do forensics on a compromised thinking system? How many security defense teams know what attacks look like against a defense system? So what are the things that we did to make sure to prepare the people that are implementing and operationalizing these systems that they're adequately prepared? And then how did we incorporate security into the design at every single phase? Was a security person, was a security architect involved at the onset at the requirements phase? Did you have the security operations teams? What about the GRC teams, right? So security and GRCs, how did we consider those design controls at the beginning? What are the roles and responsibilities? And then what is ultimately all of the documentation that we need? And so I did a wonderful deck that describes out each of these phases so that when you're documenting the 6 explainability types, these are some of the things that we ultimately want to consider. Again, I'm just going to kind of go through this based on time. For documenting all data collection and pre-processing, these are some of the questions that we would ask. Is it reliable? Is it up to date? Is the data ultimately represented? Assess all the process and technology. There's a whole series of things that we should be doing around this. Did we consider a more interpretable model as an example? When we're using biophysical data as an example, so now we're starting to get into, highly sensitive PII that also has really interesting correlations into the metaverse as well. Did we document the risk? If we're using a black box, why? And what are the impacts of us doing that? Document and validate our rationale. So what is the technical explanation for why we use this system? What are the tools that we use to be able to extract the textual and contextual information so that we can present it to people who are asking for it? What was the justification? How did we prepare the teams? Did we understand did we identify situations where decision automated bias and automated distrust bias can occur, and ultimately, how did we mitigate that? How did we incorporate security? Did we do threat models, right? So did we model out the attack surface of the algorithm? Who did the penetration testing, and were they actually competent to do penetration testing on algorithms? What type of secure code review did we do? And what are the roles? So what are all of the organizational roles that we've defined in terms of building out these algorithms? So we need to define each of the people, each of the roles that are responsible, and then what their responsibility is, and were they properly trained? And this gives us an idea of some of the procedures and policies that we would want to see in place when we're ultimately building algorithms that will help a GRC organization. So I'm going to end on this. I'm a Arthur C. Clarke buff. And one of the things that he talked about is that, when we're starting to predict out the future, and we are no longer predicting out the future, this is today, right? Star Trek is today. And so he said that if we're starting to look out and the futurist, extrapolations that he was predicting, if they're not convincing, then he has not succeeded in looking far ahead, because ultimately at the end of the day, this world that we're building has the opportunity to be utterly fantastic. And that's my lecture for today.
Thank you, Jenai. Okay, it's now Albert, your turn.
Thank you. Boy, tough act to follow, both of you. But I'll try to be the connector. So I took a different approach with this digital transformation, cybersecurity accelerator or decelerating the whole process. And what I discovered is digital transformation is everything being connected. I'm talking everything to Wi-Fi, the drones that we see on this image, the windmills for the utilities, the geolocated control tractor that's doing farming, and everything else that's going on into this smart farming world. And I actually did some work with a climate company to do smart farming. So, all of this is in our reality now. And like Janae said, the future is now. And I'm a big fan of science fiction, and everything that I read about growing up is now our reality. So I don't have as many slides to share because I wanted to make this a more interactive presentation more than anything. And I wanted to start off with a definition of what is digital transformation. And I think that you can understand how this modifies how we do things currently and automates the process so that everything is connected. And that's a huge gap. So when Laura asked me about acceleration or deceleration, I looked at it and I said, that's the wrong question. The right question is, are we secure enough? Because if everything is connected and all businesses are relying on each other in this global environment, then we have a need to assure that everything is secure. And I don't mean in a compliance mode. It's good to have rules about what you need to start a cybersecurity program, but compliance is just a starting block as far as I'm concerned for cybersecurity. It is not an endpoint. And cybersecurity is a process more than it is a light switch. So engaging teams to get them to move forward faster, we have tools like DevSecops. And DevSecops allow us to do things that explain the fairness, like Janae was saying, and assess and test the software that's being developed. But by expanding the teams to allow everyone to be part of the security team, now we're not focused on the resources that we're lacking a lot of. And I'm talking about the 3.5 million experts in cybersecurity that we need today, which is why I'm trying to give presentations on cybersecurity to help us grow that field, not only with our mature workforce today, but also with the workforce of tomorrow. Get people interested in cybersecurity. Doesn't mean that you have to have a degree in electrical engineering, even though I have one. You know, when I started, the internet was in its infancy, and it was something that I wanted to help build. The same is true with cybersecurity. So in understanding that DevOps can become secure DevOps or DevSecOps, which integrates security, compliance, monitoring, infrastructure as code, all those artifacts which implement automated security, it brings together methodologies that help move us forward faster. It's an acceleration for security. I don't see deceleration happening except when organizations are told, don't put security in, let's sell it now. And too many of them are doing that, especially with some funding. And I won't name names, SolarWinds, for people that had received funding to launch their products, but launch it without security. That, in my mind, is the worst thing that you can do and not ethical as well. Because the three things that developers have is a feature list, what it'll look like, and a budget. And all the clients say, yeah, that'll work. But in the back of their mind, they're also saying, and we want it secure. And developers are never taught about what is security. And that's the reason that DevSecOps actually helps integrate security into the code, because it's the developers that have the most control over their own baby, and their baby is their software product that they're building. Allowing them to understand why the code is not secure while it's still on their desktop saves corporations millions of dollars a year and also drives delivery of secure code faster. So I talk about a lot of these things in my book, #hacked, which is now on Amazon. And Alex talked about known knowns and went all the way through unknown unknowns. And I was trying to find the text in my book, but couldn't get it up on the computer fast enough. And I have a section in there in #hacked, which echoes about protecting the organization from the unknown threats. If we're going to live in a society that is only looking at common vulnerability and exploit databases, we're not going to see the value that the attackers have. In all fairness, attackers are never bound by rules of engagement. So to say that fairness for AI and considering a compliance methodology for an organization really minimizes the effectiveness, in my mind, for preventing attacks from attackers. And it's all hands on deck, all all assets ready to engage war as far as the attackers are concerned, and so should we be. That's my talk, brief as it is, on digital transformation. Cybersecurity, is it an accelerator or a decelerator? The problem that I look at is stopping the attackers before they reach their destination. And we do that with a new tool that I've developed called It's Safe. Like Alex, I'm an entrepreneur and inventor, but also have been in the field for 30 years. And like Janae, I'd like to promote these ideas and these practices to others so that they can learn and start their own careers in building cybersecurity for the world. That's all I have for now, unless there's any questions. Or you'd like me to just talk about cybersecurity, because, it's not something that I know much about.
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, I think it is a valuable insight. Yeah. Okay, so we are now going to start our panel discussion. Actually, if there are some questions from the participant, we can take it, or otherwise we can, because that I found that we are very in a very broad scope, because the cybersecurity is so broad, right? So
yeah, compliance or actual security. I mean, which side are you on? I mean, it's so wide. It's a mile wide, and we only went maybe an inch deep.
Yeah, and then that my view is when you look at the cybersecurity, I think it's like the onion skin, because if you look at the onion, the surface and goes through the center, actually there are multiple layers, right? So if somebody said, oh, I look at the cybersecurity at the onion surface, oh, cybersecurity is this, and then you take out the surface and another layer, and then I look, oh, here is the cybersecurity. That's my view, that because I'm not originally in the cybersecurity side. Actually, I'm generally in digital and IT sector for 30 years. And then as you know, that cybersecurity is one of the essential parts. So I never talk about that I'm deeply involved in the cybersecurity, but I always aware about the importance of cybersecurity from the starting of my career.
Right.
And then recently I heavily involved, because as an entrepreneur, actually, I incubating the innovative cybersecurity for myself. And then I try to understand this community and the ecosystem. And I found that something trend is that, for example, my background is physics. And then I particularly I major in astrophysics. And then I look at the universe and try to simplify the complex phenomena. And to me, actually, the cybersecurity is too complex for me. The reason is that understanding for each professionals is somewhat different, because I confuse about this.
Alex, I think you need to look more about what is it you're trying to protect, and how are the attackers actually breaking the environment to make protections weak. One of the comments in the chat, Lubna, said that it is in fact amazing how little people consider security not just software, but also the hardware. And that's something I didn't touch on, because we all buy technology built in one region of the world. And right now, that region of the world is taking resources from the rest of the world so they can have dominance in the global environment, right? But the problem is, if they're already inside your network, and you're building fairness on GRC products or trying to protect software, it doesn't matter, because they're inside, which is why I built a tool that looks at scanning the environment, the network, the traffic going in and out, to block the malicious attacks that today's tools don't see. Because we're not looking at just CVEs or CWEs. We're looking at business rules of logic for, why do you have a connection going to this region when you're over in this part of the world and have no resources over there?
Yeah. That's why actually I have some analogy, like my protection is way to like providing vaccine to protect yourself, like I protect the software. Some other ways, maybe the protecting to you wear the like the clothes, or something like a bulletproof like wear to protect from something. So as Armand said, because well actually located, like for example, if you go you're nearby, like for example, the pharmacies, there are many kind of different medicines to protect something, to cure something. I think the cybersecurity, the same situation, what symptoms are looking at and what kind of things you are cure or to protect or something like that. But we are not too much think about the phenomena. That's my view, the personal view. I've talked with a lot of the cyber professional guys over the several years, and then mostly because of my business reason, I'm promoting my solution. I have a very difficulty because I think that I'm looking for the fundamental level, but it is not the majority topic. For example, if going to like in the cybersecurity exhibition or the conference, major topic is whether it's popular in the media, like ransomware, virus, or the hackers, like DDoS attack, the well-known. But I'm just asking about whether why you protecting that one, because there is a phenomenon, and then they want to protect something, but why not think about the fundamental level? In that level, actually, I like the Jenai's talk about the fundamental level, for example, AI, right? Because AI is essential part of our digital transformation. And then AI will be sitting somewhere in your enterprise, right? And then as protecting the AI system in the fundamental level is very important. But maybe just think about, many people just think about how AI can apply, like for example, using the deep learning feature engineering, and then looking at the malware or some symptoms that can be trained and then can protect something. But not many people actually think about the fundamental level, what I actually looking at the cybersecurity, and then what I really want to protect something. Now, for that actually, I enjoy the because I didn't expect, because I'm also an AI expert, and then explainable AI is very important, because all the training you do, but the interpretation is a black box. For example, you may heard about some ethnic problem, something that sexual harassment from the AI system, and then you don't know how to do, right? And then what happened that you think about the AI protecting your system, right? Because there are a lot of the AI solution to protect as a cybersecurity solution. And what happened actually, fundamentally, the AI is a kind of like an internal hacker. Right, you can imagine that, for example, the zero trust. Zero trust means that, for example, that you don't trust anyone, even in house, right? So you have a protecting measure, whatever is your side or the other side, right? It's all on the measure. But what happens in the AI will repress your cybersecurity professional or your workforce in the future. Then what happens? Right? So I really like that kind of discussion. Okay, so we have some, let's say, what is the specification?
I was having a conversation on chat about antiviruses and not being able to ask an endpoint if it's well or not. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like looking for COVID. Unless you have the right tools, you don't know whether or not you have it. But when you have a PC that's been infected by an attacker, they mm-hmm. modify the tools on the machine so that you can't see that they've been exploited. And that's why tools that talk to endpoints are not effective. And only resources that look outside of the devices can be effective to see the actual communications going back and forth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just looking at another question.
I do have a question. I'm the host, but I do have a question as well. When you have finished looking at other question, I
do want to kind of hit the point home of how ill prepared we are right now in terms of how we protect and defend thinking systems. So if we think of it through the lens of, we were talking a little bit about sensors, and, algorithms are on board on the sensors making decisions, right? That means that these algorithms, we are immersed in AI right now, right? And so one of the things, it's really interesting because when you start looking at, hey, how do I design actual security controls around an algorithm? You know, we tend to focus on, you know, some of the traditional mechanisms that you would look at in terms of software security, but you're dealing with a thinking system. Right. And so how would I attack a human brain? I social engineer it. And oftentimes that's the same way that I would approach, you know, compromising or attacking an algorithm. If I know that algorithm has bias laid, then what I can do is I can over-index on that data to get that system to react in a specific way. If I know that this algorithm cannot see brown skin, then I'm able to over-index on that algorithm so that I can get that system to react the way I want it when it sees a person that looks like this. And so you know, I think that we've got to do a better job of A, getting security people involved, but B, starting to think outside of the box on all of the different type of threat models that exist when we're dealing with these types of algorithms. And here's where it gets difficult. If we're talking about just one system or one product, that's one thing. But when you're dealing with, you know, a company that has you know, millions of sensors that are ultimately deployed, all of them imbued with algorithms, we're asking a lot of all of the security people involved to make sure that we design the protective mechanisms, but again, defense. And that's where, when I start looking at digital transformation, period, we tend to fall down on. And that is not just defense, but training. We're not fast. We don't communicate quickly inside of a corporate environment, and we are not prepared to work together the way that we do in sports, to work together to be able to stop those kinds of breaches on a mass scale from happening. And so now Metaverse has given us that opportunity to kind of like buttress our training capabilities. But when you think about the drills that we do on the security side, you know, based on the specific types of attacks, we don't deal with attacks that deal with thinking systems. So like I said, I think architects and engineers may be a little bit better prepared, but on the defense side and on the forensic side, we are ill prepared to deal with this. And because these systems are making decisions, think about all of these systems that are now the AI that is, or algorithms that are embedded in surgical systems. Right? Think about all of the medical systems that are being used to pump our hearts. Look at all of the medical devices that are being used, right, to keep us alive, you know, oftentimes. And think about, you know, have we really, a couple of things. One is built the protective mechanisms, but are we prepared to defend? You know, do we have a security force that's ready to go, that if all of a sudden these attacks are happening against life safety systems in a specific hospital, that the defense teams are ready for that? You know, so I think, you know,
that's why they need to
get a
be
little
automated and built in, just like you're saying, Janai. They need to be automated. They need to be in the network, because defense teams cannot stop a breach in effect. And compliance isn't going to stop it either. The controls might, but you have to document that the controls are there. I get that.
Yeah, well, I even think we're not threat modeling it out, you know, so we're not at, you know, so for instance, if we use, I don't care, MITRE, kill chain, doesn't matter. You know, but, you know, I don't think that we're like identifying every single stage that the attack can occur, and then every single iterative, you know, movement that the attacker would make. Can I detect? Can I block? Can I detect? Can I block? I don't think we're mapping those out. I don't think we're building out the appropriate playbooks. I know we're not drilling, you know, so when we look at sports and we look at sports teams, I'll take American football as an example. And the drills that, so when you think of somebody who's been playing professional sports, more than likely they started about 5 or 6 years old. They do the same drills in professional sports every single day that they did when they were 5 or 6 years old. We don't drill like that. People drill once a year, you know, maybe once a month. We don't drill every single day. We don't think these things out, you know, so I think automation is absolutely a key, but when automation fails or requires human interaction, we're still too slow. And so you know, I obviously I'm making a huge pitch for drilling, but it's also, that's kind of funny. But I'm also making, you know, a pitch that we start augmenting our drills.
I see what you did there. I'm pitching for pipelines too.
Oh. Do you have any question?
Sorry.
I think that the audience has some.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I had a question. Well, but I didn't want to cut. Jenai, did you want to finish?
No, we'll end on pipelines.
That's fine. Well, I would like to understand, how do you see the problem of identity in this super hacked world? Well, I understand that approximately the 80% of security issues of companies derive from hacking personnel data. So what has been done, how companies can secure, and what is the role that could have a portable identity in making companies less hackable?
Me or Albert? Or Albert, did you want to take it, or I can jump in?
Whoever
I can
wants
take
to
it. I
answer
mean,
me,
and,
thank you.
you know, I think that taking an identity everywhere you go is the epitome of breaking security. I think that our identity is going to have to be something that's managed by the organization that you're supporting at the time that you need to have the identity, and then remove the identity when it's done. The problem is we haven't done the essential cleanup of the environments that are hosting these identity management systems. So we don't know how secure they are currently, right? And all you need to do is get inside of one identity management system if they're all the same. And now you have that person's identity no matter where they are. So it has to be a system that's going to be managed per organizational need, as well as the privilege level that needs to be applied, the role-based access, okay? These are all components of least privilege to assist organizations to deal out the information that only the people that need it get the information. I see Janai, she's agreeing.
Oh yeah. And I think
so we're not far wrong, right?
No, no. And I think part of the other problem is that when we're dealing with identity and access management, a lot of it is based off of static credentials. Even with multi-factor, it's still based on static credentials. And so there's this old concept, I don't know if you guys remember it, it's called adaptive cognitive profiles. And it's essentially, if you think about it, look at just a normal laptop, they actually use your cell phone, how much information, personal information, biological information that it captures about you. It sees your face, it knows your gait, it knows your typing patterns, it knows how tall you are, it knows your location. So if you start looking at all of the biological attributes, right, that just a cell phone can pick up about you, the concept is that your authentication systems, which already have massive amounts of PII about you, are systems that can be leveraged to authenticate you and constantly modulating between what biometric attribute it's going to check for. And if you're doing that, then it makes it a lot more difficult to execute replay attacks, to impersonate you, and so forth. Now, obviously, we're talking about authenticating based on a lot of PII, right? So there's some significant privacy issues. But if you think about it, and I'm going to keep going into Metaverse because I hope we get to talk about that someday, because there's some real issues and some real opportunities there. But this thing looks at your eyes. Think about the biological information that it is capturing about your eyes, what you're looking at.
Have you seen the Minority Report?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's life imitating art, which you brought up the reference earlier about Arthur C. Clarke, and Ray Bradbury is some of the sci-fi people that I was reading as well. All of that is coming to light, that's why, like you said, we need to be more flexible with our identities and not be static and engaged, because as organizations are compromised, and some are already compromised and don't yet know it, our identity is in the wild, so to speak, or in the dark web. And so to use that same identity everywhere you go seems to be a bit of an oxymoron if we want to talk about cybersecurity.
Mhm.
That's the point, basically, guys. Sorry, but you're not going to. So we are saying that basically cybersecurity is an unsolvable issue.
No, it didn't say that.
Well,
Not at all, but we have to start.
okay, but let me finish. But we should rely on these companies that obviously have their issue to manage for our identity. Well, I don't buy it in, not at all.
I don't either. I don't think they're being held with their feet to the fire hard enough, because they're using us as their clients and not having significant implications, resources, commitment, that's the word I'm looking for, to protect the data.
Exactly. So because there is no system at the moment behind all the efforts that everyone is doing to make 100% or 99% sure the security, well, if I have to put my identity at risk, I want to do it personally. I don't want to delegate somebody else to do that. I know that Lubna was in the space, so she's probably trying to say her word. Please switch on open your mic. I know that you have some questions or some comment to do, Lubna.
Thank you, Laura. I've been jamming the chat with my comments, but I think we've touched on a lot of topics. But security starts. Traditionally, security has been implemented through obscurity, as many of us in the security industry recognize. But the more adoption we have of digital and connected services, the greater the attack surface and the value or the reward for breaching that security. But I think security starts with education, and I mean educating the employees, the developers, and the consumer. A lot of the breaches are not happening just because somebody's attacking the technology, but it's rather because of how we as individuals handle our access, or whether it's passwords or otherwise, and our willingness to pay for the added technology that might eliminate a password, or our need to remember a password and use some a bit more interesting technologies, not just two-factor authentication, but also PKI and other passwordless solutions. But I want to just also go back and mention how important it is to recognize that security has to happen across every layer of the stack. So it doesn't matter how much you secure your software or your transport layer or whatever. If your device is hackable, or any device on your network is exposed, then there's your entry point. And that's an important thing to understand. And that's why
especially in this working from home environment.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And people are bringing their devices back to the office.
I want to say, sorry, just want to say one thing. I very often chat with very younger guys, and what I discover is that unfortunately they don't buy in their own security. So young guys don't care about where the information are stored. They care about the velocity in accessing here and there. So that's what they want. So the problem in all what you say is that if there is the missing point of the end user who finally doesn't really care about the service, so it ends up to be just a compliance thing for companies that do not really have, on the other side, a customer that is really caring of eventually highlighting issues that he or they can come up with.
I think you bring up a good point, Laura, but a lot of people have gone through that service as a convenience methodology, And then when they have been compromised and they have had an attack or an identity theft situation, they learn that this is an awful thing. It's very difficult to recover from, and it's something that they wish they could have prevented. Unfortunately, none of us are equipped with a time machine to go back in time and restart working with companies that are more cyber aware and cyber secure, rather than just throwing data up on MySpace and having all of our debauchery parties depicted with drunken escapades and things of that nature, and then try to go get a job the next day. You know, not too many people are thinking about tomorrow when it comes to using the internet. And the internet is now persistent in our lives with these devices that never leave the network, right? Do you shut it off? So it's always on. And that makes it so much easier for an attacker, because how many of these have firewalls or virus scanners or any other type of protection? Oh yeah, it's an iPhone, so it's more secure. No, it's not. It has different encryption, but that doesn't make it more secure. There are ways and backdoors into every single device on the internet. And until we realize that cybersecurity is an essential part of everyday life, we're not going to be secure, and we're going to end up as #hacked.
Well, and I think here's the, I 100% co-sign what you know, both you and Lubna were saying. You know, so look, we got a couple of problems here. Look, we've been doing this for years, and we've been training people for years, and we've been training consumers for years. I tell this story where I was at a family event, and you had a group of friends together, and one of them took their debit card and threw it across the room to another person who caught it, and then across the room yelled their PIN number. And so if you're going to give your PIN number to your debit card, then you don't care about any of the other things we talk about being hacked, right? Because you can drain the account. And so I see this more and more. And the implications of being hacked, you feel that pain, kind of like with a broken leg. I feel that pain, right? But then after my broken leg is healed, you know, I might have multi-factor, you know, I might put a couple of things in place, but I don't continue to do all of the things that I need to do to make sure that I've had, you know, good cyber hygienics. And, you know, so this is where I'm going to make my impassioned pitch, you know, for the GRC world, because companies generally change for 2 reasons. I've been hacked. 3 reasons. I've been hacked, the government tells me I have to, or the consumers are driving it. The consumers aren't going to drive it. They're just not, you know, so I want them to care, but they're not, you know, so, and companies forget hacks after a while. I watch my stock price drop a little bit, but then after that, I recover. You know, so really that's where regulatory and compliance really starts to come into play. Third-party suppliers, you know, so making sure that you force those security controls down on your suppliers. Those are ways that I've seen companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, start to care, you know, about cybersecurity. But compliance is a good way of enforcing security controls, you know, when nobody else in the world is going to care about it as much. Either that or you figure out how to monetize it, you know, so people will care about their identities and maybe consider that idea of a singular identity if they make money off of it. You know, if you figure out a way that you charge, you know, because if you're already profiting off of my PII, then why shouldn't I be able to profit off of my own identity? And so if companies have to pay to use your PII, then I think you'll start to see people care about it, because
An
it's
interesting idea. An interesting idea.
That's a very good, yeah, Jenai, frankly speaking, we should think about that.
Yeah, I wish I came up with it on my own. I'm sure somebody else has talked about it, but yeah, if you monetize it, then, you know, people will care.
I don't like very much the ethical thought behind that. I mean, thinking that we set out our identity, even if it is a string, to be very honest, it tells me very bad things.
But we already do. We receive it in terms of services, right? Access to, but we already monetize our identities if we think about how much companies profit off of our identities and our personal information. So we're just doing it. We're just not getting cash for it. We're getting services.
Well, that's what personalization and preferences and that's the business model of Facebook. But there is a lot of, that's personal data and my data, my identity. Your data is your identity. Your digital identity is not just a credential that is being issued. And there's absolutely a ton of work being done on self-sovereign identity. But even that, depending on how it's implemented, be on the blockchain or what kind of an implementation, will have enormous impact on it being really a self-sovereignty and allowing you the control over your data and therefore your identity, or is it going to be just an electronic leash that is controlled and therefore determines your access or lack thereof to services. So your personal data is nowadays, and if you equate your personal data to your identity, and then that's why they say data is the new gold.
We do have a question. How can you protect the security of company assets?
Which asset?
I was going to ask him to bring the question live, but first it starts with what is the company and have they done an assessment, and are you looking to protect the security of a company as a consumer or as the employer? Because there's a couple different ways to look at this. We have to do assessments on the organization. The risk assessment is overall, what is their strategy for doing? Very good, employer. What is their strategy for employing security? How protected are they? What industry are they in? Do they have compliance requirements? And what's motivating the security? Is it to avoid a data breach, or just to be compliant, or to actually protect data? The data is essential for all companies. And if a competitor gets your data, they can easily put you out of business. A security breach can easily put a business out of business. $3.8 million in fines are the typical average for small to mid-sized business. Hundreds of millions for larger or global businesses. But start off with a security assessment at the very least to find out where the weaknesses are, what you do have, and what you need in order to move forward. Janae?
Yeah, 100%. If you very first thing that we always do, and I'll be honest, no one ever really does it well, is that asset inventory. So you've got to document all of your SaaS infrastructure as a service, PaaS, installed apps, all of it, right? What are all of your applications? And you built out a proper asset inventory. You document all the different types of information in each of those systems. You identify the recovery time and recovery point objectives. You document, your confidentiality, integrity, and availability numbers. Get a proper asset inventory in place. And then after that, you're able to kick off what Albert was talking about, the risk assessment. So do an application level risk assessment based on that application. And let's say I'm really concerned about confidentiality-based attacks against that application. Then you model out based on this type of threat actor, exactly how would I affect the confidentiality of that application? What is the attack? And then based on that attack, how severe is it to the company? What's the likelihood that it's going to happen? And then what are the existing security controls in place? And if you measure that, what's called a risk priority number. And what that does is it gives you a really wonderful way of rating, right? What are the applications that I have the least amount of security around, the highest risk and the highest likelihood that a breach is going to happen. And then I can start identifying, okay, great, these are my security controls. What are the ones that I need to have in place in order to get those numbers where I need them to be? And by doing that, right, what it does is it allows you to custom design a very specific set of controls that mitigates your risk. So this isn't compliance, this is all about risk now. One of the things that we tend to do is we tend to give like broad, generalized security advice. about protecting things, and that's great. It's good to eat healthy, right? But if I've got cancer, I don't want you to tell me to eat better. I want you to tell me exactly what I need to do to fix this cancer. And so it's the same thing in cybersecurity. For that application, for this specific risk, what are the exact protective and detective patterns I want to put in place, preventative measures I want in place to mitigate that specific risk. And by going through that across all of your apps, and it usually takes about a week to do it well, depending on the size of your company. If you're really big,
a week could be generous in
sure.
some places.
Well, no, I mean, like for a smaller,
very ambitious in others.
You can do it in a week. But by going through that process, what it does is it provides to you a plan that you can use to immediately start mitigating the risk you're most concerned about.
Yeah, and I'd look from the organization down, then go through the assets of discovery, like Jenai said, the applications, the networks, the utilization, the services, and everything connected.
I think I got my answer. Okay.
Do we have any more question here? Check. Okay, so okay, for the time being, actually, I have some announcements about, because Jenai talk about much about the metaverse and the identity, right? Because that's my topic actually. Yeah, and then we are going to have a TiiQu event and the 30th, and then the topic is the security of the metaverse. Exactly you mentioned it. So I think that I'm not sure whether I invite you and Albert, but I will invite you. And then we have a hot discussion about that. For example, that I recently developed some metaverse like economic system that actually the avatars to join representing you, and then do some commerce in the metaverse cyberspace. And then the question was actually how you represent your identity, how you represent, and Rubina talk about like I mentioned like, oh, okay, so we may be doing the blockchain based like a self-sovereign identity, but it's messy. In even the real space identity is a problem. But if you go into the metaverse, because the metaverse is not just one space, is still we don't have any interoperability. So for example, Facebook metaverse and Microsoft metaverse, here there are many metaverse, and then whenever you join your avatar, actually how you actually unique your identity you can represent, and then who might be responsible, right? When something happens. So I think that's a key topic if you will be successful in the metaverse. So we are going to talk about, and then I'll invite you, and then maybe Laura maybe invite other people. Maybe, that because I think that the cybersecurity is essential, really essential. So the funny thing is actually that I invite more than 200 of my network in cybersecurity to that webinar, but not many people actually respond, because I think that somebody's education is very important. I think that we need to educate the cybersecurity professionals that here is a huge opportunity in metaverse, and you need to be take care of. So yeah.
We to piggyback off of that, so I teach. We have a formal academy called the Next CISO Academy, and at this point, 100% of our classes are taught in VR. And for a multitude of different reasons. One is because you're dealing with remote learning, trying to learn through a flat screen is very difficult. The next is that we are not taught how to collaborate and work together as teams in VR. And then the third is that VR gives this really immersive experiential environment that allows us to teach more complex topics in a way that you can't do in the physical world. Risk is something that has been, the bane of my existence in terms of trying to explain it to junior people. And it's because it's hard. There's a lot of embedded knowledge that comes to understanding what a business process is in the first place. And so, one of the things that I'm able to do in VR is I'm able to do these 3D models of an attack model, or rather a threat model. And by doing that, what it does is it gives the students this ability to kind of see, to touch, to like build it out in a way that makes things a little bit more understanding. And the reason is because think about in the old days how we learned. We wrote, we used pencils, right? And part of writing is memory. And so we took that away when we went to keyboards, and we took it away when we went to working with mice as input devices. We took away one of the senses, that is necessary in order to learn. And by having the haptic response that happens inside a metaverse or VR environment, it gives us a better ability to ultimately learn. So yeah, I'm all about training people in Metaverse, getting them used to working together, collaborating together in Metaverse. And so, and then I'll end on this one. It's not just about training. Think about how much it costs to set up a security operations center. It is expensive, especially if you're dealing with, trying to build, say for instance, a large team that follows the sun. And so one of the things that you're able to do in Metaverse is very quickly stand up a SOC, connected SOCs, in a way that is customized to you and the way that you would interface with these systems. And so while there's a massive use case around how we secure Metaverse environments, we also, as security people, need to know how to operate and live and work within Metaverse environments as well. There's real opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Albert, you talk about whether the Metaverse is like a matrix. Yeah, the matrix is one of the a Metaverse. Actually, there are several movies like Ready Player One. Have you ever seen? That's one typical example of the movie, and then yeah, Matrix is another one. So actually,
in the Matrix movie, they have a character called Morpheus.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I present myself as Morpheus, offering people the blue pill or the red pill.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to know what's inside your environment? Or do you want to go blissfully back into your matrix and believe that you're really secure when you're not?
Mm-hmm. You know that the fundamental goal. Actually,
Alex is the only one that didn't laugh. I don't get this. What's going on, Alex? How do I get to you?
You know that because I'm not sure whether we can build up the really the metaverse that we dream about. But actually, you have seen the one thing the typical of the metaverse is that the guy actually he confused about whether he is in real space in cyberspace, right? I think that's we talk about our topic is the cybersecurity, right? But the fundamental whether you don't have any a differentiation between the real space and cyberspace, and whether we talk about cybersecurity is a good terminology for the metaverse. I just think about because it's the interesting topic we think about because the metaverse is actually the real space in cyberspace converged, and then you cannot figure out whether you are in the cyberspace or in the real space. And then you protect something, but if you don't know about whether it's a real thing or the cyber thing you want to protect it, then how you can say that I'm going to do a cybersecurity for that. So this is just interesting topic, right?
Yeah, there's in fact, there are some interesting convergences that are happening right now. So we talk oftentimes about converged security, so digital security, physical security, crisis management. And when you start to go into the metaverse environment, I'm sure we've all at this point read articles about how people are getting harassed and attacked inside these environments and the mental impacts that it has. And oftentimes the mental impacts that we experience are far more visceral than they are in the physical world when we are attacked. Yes. It sticks with you. You repeat it over and over again, and our brains are, have trouble with it. And so when you ask yourself, okay, well, who's responsible for designing the protective mechanisms to prevent that type of stuff from happening? Everybody goes silent. Oh, it's on the designers. It's on this, right? But in the physical world, we have fully defined roles, right? Human resources and physical security would operate on that. But in the digital world, it's different. And so there's this really interesting convergence of digital security, physical security people need to have a part in Metaverse as well, and human resources to participate on these design teams. so that we can start having real conversations about how you design the requirements in place, so that people are protected in these environments. So right now it's, they come up with a couple of things like you had cross your arms and people can't come within 5 feet of you and all these other things that are really unsophisticated, to be quite honest. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us who play a part in security to come together and figure this out, because it's bad, So yeah, what's happened, it's almost creating new roles, for us in the security industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everyone, the conversation is very, very, very interesting. Although we started saying that cybersecurity is not sexy at all, finally I end up thinking that it is very sexy.
Totally, serious.
So I let Alex wrap up the conversation and have a final thought from all of you, and then we close at 6:30 as forecasted.
Okay, so I think that I want to ask you just your thought about what is cybersecurity mean to you. I think that Laura mean to sexy, right? So just one word. What does it mean?
To me personally, cybersecurity is strictly related to ownership. So I would like to see a future where we own our data and we travel with our data. And but I am aware that we need to create the culture, and it's absolutely not there right now. Is a matter of education, as we said before, and then security. If people don't buy in, we will never have a secure system from my perspective.
Jenai?
Well, for me, cybersecurity is always, to quote the Matrix, that about protecting that which is most important. So protecting and defending the things that are most critical to an organization. And when I start to look at, I always go to biological models, because the physical world, the biological world has been around for billions of years. And when you look at what happens in digital space, it is an immature version of what happens in physical and biological worlds. But for me, it's a digital immune system. When you think about it, your immune system right now is transparent to you. You don't say, hey, immune system, I want you to operate better because I'm going into a riskier environment, right? Your immune system is adaptable. And when it reacts, it is because there's something going on and I need to be alerted. And so to me, it's like, as we build these systems, if we attempt to mimic biological models in the way that we design security, I think things are going to ultimately stick a little bit better.
Albert?
Yeah, going back to what I said about Morpheus and offering people the red pill or the blue pill, I think cybersecurity is all about visibility, because until you start to look at your own environment, you don't really understand how secure you really are or what you need to do to better protect the environment, your data, your client's data, your business, the resources within your organization. Whether it's a pen test, a risk assessment, or, better software security controls, all of them play a part in understanding what's going on inside your organization, which is now part of your quote unquote metaverse or all of the internet. Because before COVID or the pandemic, we had a well-established perimeter around our businesses, and that's what was protecting our organizations, was the perimeter for the security. But now, from work from home and remote workers and come back into the office with your equipment types of technology and support, we're allowing the internet inside of all of our environment, like it or not. We need to know how secure we are, and that's why visibility is the one word for me.
Okay,
so you don't get hashtag hacked.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it's almost time to close. So thank you for everyone. And then Laura, why don't you close for today's?
Well, I thank you very much, all of you, for your incredible contribution. I thank you very much, Alex, for putting together the conversation and being always there. Alex is also the US ambassador for TiiQu, and we are planning something absolutely exciting or thinking at the moment in the Metaverse. We will tell you more about. I'm very interested to bring in the conversation about security of identity, etc. But we will talk about that. Well, I invite everyone to participate in next TiiQu Talks, and thank you very much to all participants.